You're listening to Why Germany podcast, the best place for relocation stories and expert tips, sponsored by Over the Offic, relocation agency to Germany, with your host, Eden Levine.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining in our podcast, Why Germany. My name is Eden Levine. I am the host, and with me, Alejandro Estrella.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. And I think we're going to start bluntly into why Germany?
How much time do you have?
Enough time for you.
So the short version is that I studied my year abroad here. I studied German as an undergrad and along with psychology. And I came and I excelled. And so I got a few scholarships. The department supported me. And I came over initially just for the summer. And then for the summer, and then I did well, and then the winter semester started, and then I did so well in the winter semester that I called them and I was like, listen, I'm actually getting pretty good at this, so can I stay for the whole year? And so I applied for more funding. I was working as a tutor at a cafe, all this stuff, typical student stuff, and and then I ended up staying for the year. Went back to the States, finished up my undergrad, worked for a while. The Trump years happened, 2016, and then it was 2017. I was running my own business, but was doing 80-hour weeks and was really just breaking even. And I was like, when's the last time I was happy? And I thought about Leipzig, and I guess in a way it was me trying to kind of just reset my life a little bit, kind of come back to the last place that I felt really good, and see what happens, where it goes from there. However, the plan once I graduated was to come back and study medicine, actually. And I because you can study here for a fraction of the cost of the United States. Everybody, regardless of major, pays the same at the uni, and so I figured, okay, I'm gonna go and study medicine, and it's gonna be cheap as hell. And then I didn't get in. I was a few points shy of the GPA, but that was the best thing that could have happened, because then I slowly started. I then had to figure some stuff out. I was going through friends, and then someone was like, you know what, you're always talking about these great ideas, and why don't you go to business school and get a business degree and learn how to make some money? And so yeah. And so I found an MBA program and I applied, got in, and a few years later, here we are.
Wow. So let's go back a little bit, right? So you came from the United States.
Yes.
And tell me what you thought about Germany in the beginning. So you're like, okay, I'm going to go to a semester in Germany. What were your thoughts?
So the funny thing is that my family reacted my family was more scared than I was.
Really?
Yeah.
Scared in what way?
They're my family's Latino. They're from South America, and they're very in your face people, very kind of strong family ties.
You can hear them that they're there.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was they were concerned that the culture might be too cold and off-putting and stuff like that. And I mean, honestly, it's not. I can see where they were coming from, but American culture is more closer to German culture than, let's say, Latin culture is to German culture.
So you're saying basically Americans are also not as warm.
Yeah, exactly. What I mean is that the Americans are warmer than the Germans, but they're not as warm as
in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was born and raised in the United States, I was already acclimated to that, and so the transition between cultures wasn't so brash, right?
Wow.
So that's the first thing. And then the second thing was also that I have a very large family on my father's side. And when I told the family about that, they were like, oh, you have a cousin in Germany.
Really?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And then they were like, here's her email, write her. Maybe you can run into each other at some point. And then they basically, and so I did. And she said, and I wrote her, and she's like, yeah, we're in Leipzig. Where are you coming? Yeah. And then I was like, get the hell out. I'm coming to Leipzig. And like, oh, happy days. So that was funny. Then like I said, I went, I met them. It was nice. I mean, like they're very Germanized. Like they keep to themselves. They're wonderful people, but they're more private than, let's say, your traditional Latin family. And so, but it was nice to have. It was nice to have someone of somewhat of a familiar face and a family tie in the city, and so that I think helped to ease the transition.
Okay, but so they were somewhat worried for you, right?
Yeah.
And were you worried?
Like I said, I wasn't that worried. I think what you would call is that I was 19, so I think you call it like the unknown unknown. It's like you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. You're just down for an adventure. And
Okay.
so I think it was definitely more that. I was in that age and that mindset where I was just down for an adventure. I knew what was funny was that I really didn't know what to expect. I got a taste of it, right? Like after that summer course where you are learning how you show up and you don't know how to ask for a piece of bread. You can't ask for a Brötchen, in German, let alone, yeah. So that part was interesting. But besides that, I really just kind of went with it.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Okay. And what do you feel like, let's say, the main differences between like your experience in the United States and here in Germany?
I mean, I think right. So it depends. There's so many different dimensions. You can talk about personal life, work life, studies, all that stuff. So if you could help me narrow down which one of those areas you're looking for,
Let's
then that
start
would
with,
be.
okay, your first day in Germany,
Yeah.
and what are your thoughts? What would you say? Oh my God,
Yeah.
what happened here?
I mean, the funny thing is that so I'm from New York, and New York is really loud. Like just really loud. And it wasn't actually until I came back after my year abroad that I came up in Penn Central Station onto the street, and I heard this roar, and I was like, is this what this sounds like? Because I hadn't no really. I was totally amazed because I hadn't been or I hadn't been in this. Leipzig has 600,000 people. Back then it had less, and this was 10 years ago. And so back then it had less, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, oh God, how do people do anything here? Like how do they think? How do they hear themselves? And the answer is that they don't. I don't think you do. I think you get caught up in the noise of of not just the physical noise, but it's just there's so much motion. There's constant motion, constant going. And that's great for certain things, right? It is great for a lot of it's great for when you want to make shit happen. It's
And
great.
Also for some people, they're
Yeah.
looking for this kind of
Exactly.
everything is happening.
Exactly. And at that point in my life, that's just not what I was looking for anymore. I was kind of like, all right, I don't know if it's goodbye forever, but it's definitely goodbye for now at this phase in my life. And
So it's not in the age of 19; it's after you came back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At this point, this is right. So a year later, I came back. I realized how loud everything was, and then I got back into the thick of it. And then I realized at 27, I was like, I'm no longer happy here. And so I packed my bags and left.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that. My family also come from Israel, and when they came the first time, they're like, "Where is everybody?"
Okay, yeah.
They see people.
Yeah.
They don't hear anything, and we're
Right.
like in the middle of city center. What's happening? Where is
Right,
everybody?
right.
And then they kind of discovered they are the loudest ones,
Right.
and how you sit down in a coffee shop and you speak with each other, and then everybody is looking at you because you're the loudest one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's really and they like to look at you in these phases of like, why are you so
Yeah,
loud?
yeah.
You're disturbing the nature.
That's right. That's right. The Germans like their silence. This is true.
Yeah, and it seems like they're somewhat in their own world,
Yeah.
and they talk with each other. They hear each other. I never hear them. It
Yeah.
sounds like
Yeah. No, this is true. So sometimes I imagine it has. There must be something in the early years of like when you're developing your kind of ocular perception or something. I don't know, but there must be because because you can be right next to them and they'll like almost be whispering to each other, and you're like, how do you hear each other? And there's a whole table, and there's a whole table in between them, you know.
Right.
But so that's definitely one thing. I mean, but I must say for the record that that there is I was all of those, any fears I may have had and any fears that my family had were completely blown away, because I very quickly made German friends. The people that just the people that I encountered were very, very friendly. Also, students, some also studying psychology, others also studying, languages, and I very quickly became friends with them, and these people opened their home to me, which is a big deal here. In the first couple of weeks, to have to just invite someone over, that's not common. and so like, it's very much a pub culture here, and when someone invites you over, it's a big deal. And so yeah, but I very quickly became I was very quickly welcome. And so I need to say for the record that any expectations or any insecurities were very quickly blown away. That's not to say that you don't run into some characters.
And you have characters here. Wow. And actually, I want to focus this episode a little bit about myths about Germany.
Sure.
So you already opened the door for one of them,
Sure.
which is basically how German mentality is very cold and unfriendly.
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
want to say it's kind of like with the tiny star above, because at least from my experience, it's not the easiest to start like friendship with Germans. So
Yes.
You would need some form of a leverage of someone or somewhere. So if you're in a university or if you're in a job, and it's not the easiest to start with, but they can be your best friend very easily. And what you told about them like opening their house for you, I had the same experience in a very weird way, because we had a student exchange when I was in high school, and German students came to my friends' apartments, and they came to our school. And I knew one of them, and I knew I wanted to come to Germany. And then I asked him, okay, I'm coming to Germany to see if I want to live there.
Yeah.
Would you mind, talking to me so I can ask all the questions? And he was like, not only I will answer all your questions, and mind you, he was a med student, so he probably did not have a lot of time.
Yeah.
I would also let you use my apartment, and I will stay at my girlfriend's apartment.
Wow.
And I was like, really, I haven't seen the guy in like 5 years, didn't talk to him. And he was just like openly giving his, and I thought, are all Germans like that?
Yeah.
Well, not all, but it is more friendly and more welcoming than you think.
Yes, that I can confirm. Yeah.
So what could you say is what worked for you in finding friends in Germany?
So the first thing that I learned, which I think is very important to learn culturally if you're coming from the outside, is that everybody else has, or at least in English, you have just the word friend. Whereas the Germans it's like a concentric circles, and they have like 3 circles of friends, right? So you have the Bekannte, which is like the acquaintance, I guess is the best literal translation you have in English. And then you have the Kumpel, which is kind of like the buddy. And then you have the Freund. And then the Freund is like the friend. That's the friend level. That's the grail. And so, and obviously that's where you want to get to, but they're very, these concentric circles, each one of these circles takes time. You are obviously, if you have a great, as an English speaker, I'm not saying even just as an American, just as an English speaker, you can walk in very frequently. You will have a great night at a bar, run into someone, and then the next day be like, yeah, I'm going to go play pool with my friend. It's like, no, that's not your friend. If you do that to a German, they'll be like, oh, that's wonderful. When is he coming? Like, they're not gonna, they do not go this fast. It's much more kind of like, hey, let's hang out a couple times. And then you are the Kumpel, and the Kumpel is the one that gets invited to, once you are the one being invited to go do things, and you are staying like after hours, then you're the Kumpel. And then, no, really, like if you do, basically, like if you're only getting a coffee or getting a beer, and then it's like, all right, cool, I got like the rest of my life to go live, then you're just like a Bekannte. if you are doing after hours stuff, then it's like if you're staying at late hours, having a beer, you having a chat, whatever, then you're a kumpel. If I think once they start to, because they tend to be very private people, once they start talking about their families, their troubles, or things like that, then you've graduated into like the friend section. And that's really, yeah, it's funny. But
there you have it, a scale.
Yeah,
this is how you know.
Yeah.
We will put it in documents. No, I'm kidding.
there'll be a graphical representation. And so, but that's really interesting because just knowing that can help you enormously, particularly as an American, but also just as a generic English speaker, because we're more open, we're more friendly. We don't tend to have. When's the last time you heard anybody say, "I just met with my acquaintance"? It's like nobody says that. So that's another myth that I can say that is really important, or a cultural aspect that can help debunk a myth that you can move into friendship. It just takes longer than usual.
Yeah, what I get from what you're saying is basically you're building a relationship with them. Like you have to think long term if you really want them to be your friend.
Right.
Although I must say that I think it depends on the mentality they come from. So a lot of them have this tendency in thinking more in like the international perspective. So those who maybe already traveled a lot or have done a semester somewhere or a year somewhere. I know a lot of Germans do that. And then they come with a different perspective on how to get friends and how to basically talk with each other. And I see them even have more tendency to English and to basically form friendship in much easier way.
Yeah.
So I would say it's not something. It really depends on who you're talking to, and it could be that those who are more with the international mindset would be kind of the easiest to approach to and to start with.
Yeah.
And I think we touched a bit about English, so I think here there is a big myth we can talk about.
Yeah.
So the myth that I'm talking about is that everybody here speaks English. Is that true, Alejandro?
Absolutely not. Most of the time, I would say that most people, I mean, first, touching very quickly just on the regional side that you talked about, there's differences between East and West Germany. If you're not familiar with the history, look it up.
Be familiarized with the history. It's a big thing here in Germany.
Yeah, it's important, and so that ties into that. I would say that again, I would confirm. I have friends from the West. I have friends from the East. I would confirm that. I would confirm what you're saying, that their mentalities are different, although that is changing, albeit slowly. I would say that the English. Yeah. sorry, right.
That's where
we are. Right, so we are. So when it comes to English, I think that most people will try to speak English. Their English will not be that good. So you can try. You usually one of two things usually happen. Either you keep trying to speak in English and or German, like with the language, and you kind of try to ascertain whose language capability is better. It's like this little dance
based on age, based on like how do they even say something, right? Like if they have a major like heavy accent, you'll be like, okay, unlikely.
exactly. And so there's that, and or you will just default to speaking, to speaking the local. Yes, you will end up speaking whoever with the language of the person with the most proficiency, and then if not, but by and large, people will try. They also, an important point, they will also very much admire and be grateful if you try to speak German, because they are very aware. I have not met a German that I spoke to that didn't compliment me and thank me for speaking German, for trying to speak German back before I could speak it at the fluent level that I do now. And then now for speaking it, because they're like, I'm so happy I don't need to learn this language.
Right.
Like it can be really hard. It can be, it's not for the faint of heart. And so when they see you trying, they are very, very gracious to you.
Right. And there's this sentence that says like, life is too short to learn German.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about relocation to Germany, look for Over the Ofek on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
So basically, you can get to a level where you're like, okay, I'm comfortable enough to just randomly start talking in German or like even being in a conversation. But I feel like I got to this point where I am really not at the level that I would probably learn more. I don't have, I have maybe like 80% of the time, like I can nail it, but a lot of like there are other times like this 20% that I just, life is too short.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I also have this experience of people coming to me like, your German is really great. What they are basically saying is, how about we stick to German? And you don't even ask me to go into the English part. And it's important to mention, a lot of the movies and TV series are dubbed even for adults here.
Right.
TV, movies. If you want to go to the cinema, you really have to look specifically to the times that it's in the original language.
Yeah.
And this is also, in my opinion, a major factor into why they're not comfortable with already using the language that a lot of them already have learned. And B, why they consistently saying, okay, German is where we are at. And we're just like, some of them are even very defensive about like, hey, you're in Germany, learn German. While they're kind of missing out on a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
So this is really where we're saying, and a lot of the time you would say, on the other side, you're saying, okay, I don't speak German, could you speak English? And then they're like, ein bisschen. And then they're like, just a little. And then they are like, what the hell, you sound completely fluent in English. So it's really like a lot of them know the language and will just do everything to avoid it. So it's really coming from a lot of lack of confidence in the language and basically lack of use they're not using. But it does start, I think, to become better. And also it depends on, like you mentioned, where you're at in Germany. So like the east part, because they were mostly by the Soviet regime, they studied, at least those who were at that time studying
Russian,
language, it's more Russian, right? So a lot of people in the East still know Russian till this day. But everybody already switched to English, and the younger ones have more tendency again. But again, it's with the tendency, and not everybody would be even happy to speak English. And let's not even talk about like official government offices. This is no sorry. Although I did see some of the websites becoming also a little bit English friendly.
Right. Some websites do now have a tab where you can kind of click and it'll make everything into English. But it's a great point that you bring that up, because they legally have to do everything in Germany because it is the legal language, and in order to avoid any kind of misunderstanding and suing or any of that stuff, they have to speak to you in this very dense bureaucratic German. And so even having, which is you can argue is a language in and of itself, but the point is that it helps, we're covering a lot of things right now, and it helps to basically to have a network. It helps to be kind of open-minded. And it helps to learn some level of German, just so you're not completely deer in the headlights kind of situation.
I mean, I know people who are here for like 10 years and barely say anything. Like they have barely like the minimum amount of German that you need. You can survive without German. I would not recommend that whatsoever. And I mean, I know also those who live in Berlin are kind of coming to Berlin with the thought of, at least I don't have to learn the language. I would know people in Berlin that will tell you, well, I would still not recommend that, because they are still speaking German everywhere. It's still, you still need to use it, especially in the governmental offices. But you mentioned,
I would just want to just tack on something really quick. Not to get overly philosophical, but Wittgenstein, the philosopher, said that the limits of my language are the limits of my mind. The limits of my language are the limits of my world. That's what he said. So I think that while yes you can get on like with English here, that's about it. Right? Like you can get on. But usually when people leave something that's familiar and they go and change their context abruptly, you start to lose a certain dimension, a certain taste of the life if you don't learn the language.
Right.
You start to like it's like only having one flavor of bread. You know, it's kind of like there's so much more nuance. There's so many. You're gonna miss jokes within your work setting. If you find work, which is very likely in a German setting, you're gonna miss out on jokes. You're gonna miss out on certain cultural memes and nuances and mindsets too, because a lot of the language will tend to this applies to languages across the world and cultures across the world, that a lot of languages manifest certain things about the cultural mindset, right? And so there's so many German aphorisms and so many terms and phrases that if you like, once you hear it and you get it, you're like, oh, that's why. Really,
that's very true.
And so I think that you can go to not just to Berlin. You can go to Berlin, to Cologne, to Frankfurt, and you can get by with English, sure. But then you're gonna like miss the little things.
I mean, it's part of integration, right? Like if you want to feel like you really shifted completely and not just like are hanging somewhere, then the language part is very important. And I feel like also if you stay enough time, you're kind of it's kind of inevitable that you will absorb some of it, right? Unless you're really resistant to it. And I know some who are like, no, we speak in English and doesn't matter, but I just think it's not the right approach. If you really want to be part of this community here. So there was one thing also that you mentioned about like how the language is also altering how we think, or like it's how the different languages have also different aspect of life of the communities who speak it. I heard somebody talking about this actually, that languages with a clear future tense tend to spend more. And those who have less clear future tense, if I remember correctly, they tend to save more. So if you think about German, they rarely use the really future tense. Even the future, they use the present tense. Whereas in English and in Hebrew, for example, I can say as well, they do have a very clear future tense and they speak a lot of the future. And they are also two capitalistic countries. And I know a lot who not only don't save, they have a huge minus. And whereas in Germany, the perspective about money is you have to like keep it, and like it's very conservative, and you never can even get to a minus. So it's interesting to kind of see how really there is a difference in how you react to certain aspects. Like with regard to the language.
Right.
I want to touch on a different myth here. You mentioned about the difference between the East and the West, right? And I know a lot of people that I talk with about relocation, and they're like, yeah, I don't want to go to the East because it's the East, you know, kind of like they are still stuck in, I don't know, 1950s in perspective. Is it really true? Like, is the East really still very conservative and like don't like foreigners and really far back in the past, whereas the West is completely different? Or what do you think?
I want to preface this with and emphasize that this is very much what I think. This is
really?
very
Okay.
this is very much what I think, and it's not. I can't speak for really deep research, statistics about it. I am only speaking from my opinion and my experience. I think that it depends. I would advise to people to know yourself as much as possible before coming here.
Wow.
In general, like in whether it's East or West, because yes, you can learn a lot. Yes, you will learn a lot about yourself at the moment you change context. That's just inevitability. That's just a function of the process. You will learn a lot about yourself from changing context. But the more you know about yourself, it's also enormously helpful, because the differences that you will find have to do with, they're multidimensional. They have to do with pace. They have like pace, like pulse of the city. They have to do with open-mindedness. They have to do with, again, this open-mindedness versus closed-mindedness. They have to do with politics, cultural dynamic. But I would even say that just to latch onto very quickly an example with politics. I joke around with my American friends. We joke around and we say, because there's quite a lot of us here, and we say that Leipzig is kind of like Austin, Texas, because it's a very liberal city in a very conservative ocean, or it's like a liberal island in a conservative ocean. Because the state of Saxony, which is where Leipzig is located, is one of several of these eastern states, and they are historically just underdeveloped. You know, they are only now, like in the past 10 years, reunification was almost 30 years ago.
Right.
Only in the past 10 years are they really seeing the benefits of the investment in the infrastructure, in the education system and stuff like this. And even then, they're coming up a bit short. So they because they're not used to it. I mean, again, if your country's basically has this strong Soviet oppressive regime, and then on top of that the controlled economy and all of this, it's like there's no incentive or opportunity for innovation. And so what happens is that is changing, and people wanted to change. The young people here wanted to change. The administrators wanted to change. Right now, our mayor is, regardless of what you think about him, he's really great in terms of supporting initiatives. I've been to several of things that he's like helped to open and stuff like this. So I think sorry for the long answer to your question, but what I'm trying to say is that it very much depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for something, if I can only speak for myself, if I was looking for something more familiar to the United States, I probably would have gone to Cologne or to Frankfurt, because those are just like the big traditionally Western speaking hubs, something like Munich, right? But I wanted something different. I wanted something just completely I wasn't like an anti-capitalist or anything. I'm not to this day. I study business, but like, but I, and I'm very much for it. But I was looking for a complete different take on life, so that I could bring my knowledge of self and then also learn about myself.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, and how I feel and how I see things, right? There are differences until this day between the West and the East. But, and there's a big but, there is a lot of movement and shift from the West to the East of Germans and of non-Germans.
Yeah.
So inevitably, it already changes how the East part of Germany looks like, reacts, work. And I see how, Leipzig, as you said, it's kind of like a bubble within the whole of Saxony. But it does radiate outside, especially now because the city is growing really massively, really quick. Again, inevitably, people also expand from beyond just Leipzig, and then it radiates out. Because it's still pretty affordable here,
sure.
And the whole perspective and mentality here in Leipzig is completely different and liberal and so on.
Yeah.
So it has changes. It had changed since the past 30 years, obviously. As we always like to joke about, German slowly.
Yeah.
But it's kind of something that is coming. Also, more internationals are here, and more opportunities for jobs, and you feel a little bit like these changes.
Yeah.
There is still, I know a lot of Germans who say there is like this East charm still, that things are still a little bit more German than, let's say, too international than in the West. But yeah, it really depends on, like you mentioned, what is it you're looking for. But I see that at some point becoming less and less and less different than each other.
Yeah.
All right, so I think it would be a good time to maybe ask you, what would you recommend, or what kind of tip would you give someone who is thinking of coming to Germany? I mean, we spoke a little bit about several tips, like, hey, see where you are on a German scale, learn German, of course, and check who you are before you're even deciding where you want to come in Germany.
Your tendency to build community, or your disposition, your predisposition, your attitude towards building community is directly correlated to your ability to relocate and integrate and adapt and grow and thrive anywhere. So that's not saying that you dilute who you are. It's actually the opposite. I'm saying bring who you are, right? Like bring that diversity, those values, that mindset, bring that, but don't be seeking to impose. Seek to understand. Seek understanding. Ask questions. Ask more than you talk. Ask more than you say. Share more than you take. Really kind of, if you have that mindset and that attitude and you behave in accordance with that, I think you'll be amazed how welcome you will be just about anywhere you go.
Right. It sounds to me like when you said that, I felt like the understanding of, in some way, us expats are somewhat of a different species, right? We bring something with us from a specific mentality that we keep with us. But we have, I don't even know if it's a 50-50 thing, but some percentage is somewhat already integrated to the community here, to the country, to what the country brings with it. So in a way, we adapted differently than if we stuck to where we came from, but we still bring our uniqueness. So then we become something. I always say that I don't feel German and I don't feel Israeli anymore. So I feel like somewhat in between, kind of like a different species.
Right.
So in my opinion, this is also what helps us integrate well, because you don't forget who you are,
right?
But you become somebody else in a sense,
right?
So it's kind of like, hey, keep in mind that you probably there are gonna be things you're gonna miss, or some things you'll be like, I don't understand how they operate like this when I know something else.
Yes, yeah.
But there would be then later on things that you will look at your original country and you'll be like, oh, now I think completely different about this from a different perspective.
Yeah,
so
for sure. That opens up Pandora's box for I hope another episode conversation. But yes, absolutely, that's true, and I think that's
we have enough myths to talk about. Maybe in a different episode. Yeah. Alejandro, thank you so much for joining. We had a lovely conversation. I hope to have you back again soon.
Thank you, Eden. Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Why Germany. If you want to learn more about relocation, make sure to visit overtheoffect.com, your relocation experts.